Welcome to Trending Update USA. I am Stefan, and today we're asking a deeper question. Are we expecting too much, too soon, from young champions in modern tennis? Or are we simply forgetting how greatness actually develops? Because when a former professional like Andrea Petkovic steps in to defend Coco Gauff, calling her underestimated, it's not just a passing comment, it's a reflection of something bigger happening in sports culture right now. Recently, Petkovic publicly spoke about Gauff and pushed back against the growing narrative that questions whether Gauff is meeting expectations. She compared Gauff's journey to that of Steffi Graf, one of the greatest players in tennis history, to highlight how different eras shape how we judge athletes. And that comparison alone tells us this conversation is not really about wins and losses. It's about perception, pressure, and perspective. Let's take a moment to understand what actually happened. Petkovic argued that Coco Gauff is being underestimated despite already achieving what most players can only dream of. She pointed out that in Graf's era, players were allowed to grow, develop, and even struggle without constant global scrutiny. In contrast, Gauff's career has unfolded under a microscope since she was a teenager. Now here's where it gets interesting, because this isn't just a defense of one player. It's a critique of how modern sports audiences, media, and even fans process success. Coco Gauff became a global sensation at just 15 years old. From that moment, she wasn't just a promising athlete, she became a brand, a symbol, and for many the next big thing. But what does that really mean? It means every match, every interview, every mistake gets amplified. It means that instead of being judged as a young player learning the game, she's often judged against legends. And that's where Petkovic's comparison to Steffi Graf becomes so powerful. Steffi Graf, during her rise, was undoubtedly dominant. But she developed in a time when media cycles were slower, social media didn't exist, and narratives were shaped over months, not minutes. Graf had space to evolve without millions of instant reactions flooding her every move. Coco Gauff, on the other hand, exists in a completely different reality. Today, a single match can trigger thousands of opinions within seconds. A loss is not just a loss, it becomes a trending topic. A dip in form isn't just part of the journey, it becomes a debate about whether she's falling off. This raises a critical point. Are we evaluating athletes fairly across generations? Because when Petkovic says Gauff is underestimated, she's not ignoring Gauff's achievements, she's highlighting how quickly people dismiss them. Gauff has already won major titles, competed at the highest level, and proven her resilience on big stages. Yet, somehow, the conversation often shifts to what she hasn't done yet. That kind of expectation creates a unique psychological environment, one that previous generations didn't have to navigate. Let's talk about pressure. Athletes have always dealt with pressure. But the nature of that pressure has changed. In the past, pressure came from competition, coaches, and maybe traditional media. Today, it comes from everywhere: social media, fan expectations, constant analysis, and even algorithm-driven narratives. For someone like Coco Gauff, this means there's almost no escape. Imagine being in your early 20s, still figuring out your game, your identity, your life, and at the same time being judged by millions of people daily. Every performance becomes a statement. Every interview becomes content. Every emotion becomes public. This isn't just physical competition anymore. It's emotional endurance. And that's something Andrea Petkovic understands deeply as a former player. Her defense of Gauff isn't just technical, it's empathetic. She's essentially saying, we need to allow athletes to be human again. Now let's bring social media into this conversation, because it plays a massive role. Social media has transformed how fans connect with athletes. It's created accessibility, transparency, and engagement. But it's also created constant exposure. For athletes like Gauff, there's no clear boundary between personal life and professional life. A bad day on the court doesn't stay on the court, it follows you online. Comments, criticism, comparisons, they don't stop. And here's the paradox. The same platforms that elevate athletes also intensify the pressure on them. This creates a situation where players are not just competing against opponents, they're also navigating public perception in real time. And perception can be unforgiving. If Coco Gauff wins, it's expected. If she loses, it's questioned. That imbalance can shape confidence, decision-making, and even long-term development. This is why Petkovic's comparison to Steffi Graf matters so much. It forces us to step back and ask, are we appreciating Gauff's journey for what it is, or are we constantly measuring it against an idealized version of greatness? Because greatness is not linear. Even legends like Graf had phases of growth, adaptation, and challenge. But those phases weren't dissected in the same way we see today. In Gauff's case, every phase is visible, and that visibility changes everything. There's also another layer to this discussion, the idea of early success. When an athlete achieves success very young, it shifts expectations permanently. Instead of being seen as ahead of the curve, they're expected to stay ahead, constantly. But development doesn't work like that. Progress isn't a straight line. It involves setbacks, adjustments, and sometimes even regression before improvement. Petkovic's point, in many ways, is a reminder that Coco Gauff is still evolving, and that should be seen as normal, not disappointing. Let's also consider the role of media narratives. Modern sports media thrives on storytelling. But sometimes those stories become simplified: hero, underdog, disappointment, comeback. The problem is, real careers don't fit neatly into those categories. Coco Gauff's story is complex. It includes success, pressure, growth, expectation, and identity. Reducing it to, is she meeting expectations? This is the bigger picture. And that bigger picture is exactly what Petkovic is trying to highlight. She's asking us to reconsider how we define success. Is success only about winning consistently? Or is it about resilience, adaptability, and long-term impact? Because if we look at Gauff through a broader lens, her impact is already significant. She represents a new generation of athletes who are not just competitors, but also public figures navigating a rapidly changing world. And that brings us to another important aspect: privacy. In previous eras, athletes had more control over their personal space. Today, that space is much smaller. The line between public and private life is blurred. For someone like Coco Gauff, this means growing up in front of the world. Every phase of her career, and her life, is documented, discussed, and often judged. That level of exposure can shape not just performance, but identity. And that's something we don't always consider when we talk about results. Andrea Petkovic's defense is, at its core, a call for balance. It's a reminder that while it's easy to analyze performance, it's equally important to understand context. Context includes era, technology, media, and human development. Without that context, comparisons, even well-intentioned ones, can become unfair. So when we compare Coco Gauff to Steffi Graf, we shouldn't just compare achievements. We should also compare environments. And those environments are fundamentally different. One allowed gradual growth. The other demands instant excellence. One had limited exposure. The other has constant visibility. One built legacy over time. The other is expected to prove it daily. That contrast changes everything. As we look ahead, the question is not whether Coco Gauff will succeed; she already has. The real question is how we, as fans and observers, choose to interpret her journey. Do we see it as incomplete because it's still evolving? Or do we recognize it as a process that deserves patience? Because ultimately, sports are not just about outcomes. They're about stories. And the way we tell those stories shapes how athletes are remembered. Andrea Petkovic is challenging us to tell a better story, one that acknowledges both achievement and humanity. And maybe that's the most important takeaway from this entire conversation. Because beyond tennis, this reflects a broader reality. In a world of instant reactions and constant visibility, we are all navigating expectations in different ways. Athletes just happen to do it on the biggest stage. So the next time we watch Coco Gauff play, maybe the question shouldn't be, is she living up to expectations? Maybe it should be, are our expectations realistic? Because sometimes being underestimated says more about the audience than the athlete. And maybe, just maybe, Coco Gauff's story is not about proving people wrong, but about redefining what success looks like in a new era. Thank you for watching Trending Update USA. I'm Stefan, and we'll see you in the next one. Audience questions. Do you think modern athletes face more pressure than past generations? Are fans expecting too much from young stars like Coco Gauff? Should social media play a smaller role in judging athletes' careers?